All right, so continuing with the theme of leadership, we have a really exciting panel coming up. This is the California Economic Summit, and there would be no economy without employers. And we are really grateful to have a number of amazing corporate leaders here that are making commitments to their communities, that are following through on their commitments to their communities. And so to moderate this conversation, I'd like to call up my friend, member of the California Stewardship Network and CEO of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, Ahmad Thomas, who is going to be moderating this conversation as soon as we get the chair on the stage. So this may be time for some more filibustering. But no, there he is, Ahmad. Round of applause, please.
Good afternoon. I am thrilled to be here today for the penultimate panel of what has been such an incredible conference, such wonderful dialogues. I will call out our panelists so we can get right to it. I know that we have limited time. We're going to be talking about California corporate responsibility, the pledges some of our leaders are making, and what they're doing to hold their companies and their leadership accountable. All right, here we are. So I will start with Jason Glickman, Executive Vice President for Engineering, Planning, and Strategy at PG&E. You're very fortunate your CEO, Patti Poppe, has been such an outspoken leader around DEI, around climate. She talks about leading from the heart, leading with love. So I think you're a great person to kick our panel off. When you talk about corporate responsibility, the commitments being made, kind of ushering in a new era of corporate responsibility in California, what are your key priorities, and how is PG&E holding itself accountable?
Yeah, well, thanks, Ahmad. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone today. We're used to doing this on Teams and Zoom, and it's nice to actually see people in 3 dimensions. You know, what we're doing at PG&E, lots of folks have heard about Patti talk about leading with love. We're also reorienting the whole company around a triple bottom line. And so people, planet, and California's prosperity. And you know, we're making a series of commitments that we call stands against each of those. You know, one that folks have probably seen prominently and repeatedly is catastrophic wildfire shall stop. Everyone and everything is always safe. PG&E is enjoyable to work for and with. I think folks who've spent time working with us over the years might say that's not always been true. That we're able to provide a healthy environment and a decarbonized energy system for all Californians, not just a privileged few. And you know, lastly, that we create prosperity for all customers and all investors. We have to get that flywheel going for investability, bringing capital so we can remake our energy system for all Californians. And so we've set those stands. It's guiding the decisions we make day to day. It's guiding the metrics that we're putting in place starting for 2022 that we measure the organization by. And you start to hear it in the dialogue. What would a company that's enjoyable to work with do in this situation, right? If you said catastrophic wildfire shall stop, what types of changes would you make operationally? You might be more willing to turn the power off in high fire threat districts when conditions merit it, or you might question old assumptions about undergrounding. So it's driving us to both think very differently about the long-term investment decisions we make in our energy infrastructure, as well as day-to-day, you know, how we show up with our customers, communities, and coworkers.
Well, I think that's very well put. It's a great segue to Miles Ryder, CEO of Driscoll's. So fortunate to have you today. I know if you've had your raspberries, strawberries, berries, it's probably hit a little different this morning, at least for those of us on the panel. You run a large enterprise. How do you think about corporate commitments in your leadership around that stewardship in California?
Yeah, well, let me start by, well, first of all, it's great to be here, and I hope you did eat some berries for breakfast or had them on the menu today. I think I'd like to start with just a kind of a little better understanding of the berry industry. It's on the extreme end of labor-intensive high value, doesn't necessarily mean high profitability, but high revenue agriculture in terms of relative to capital. It's more labor intensive than capital intensive. Berries have been around coastal California. They're actually native to the coast. Actively farmed for 150 years. My family's been doing it pretty much that whole time. And the type of business it is, and given the kind of work, it attracts a highly immigrant workforce. And so that's become embedded really in the whole functionality of the business, and what's happened through this 150 years and is really active today is this sort of economic advancement that occurs somewhat intentionally, but it's just strictly the reality of business. Someone may start as a harvester, become a supervisor, farm manager, and ultimately, and very often, a farm owner. And so, like in our company, we work with growers, independent operators, generally self-financed. Most of them at this time are either from Mexico or more generally first or second generation, and are operating their own businesses. And this is true of the whole industry, not just Driscoll's. And it's a broad range from small growers to, at this point in time, 4 of our 5 largest grower operators in California came from that background. 2 of them started as harvesters and are now 2 of the 4 largest, and 2 were second or third generation, I'm not sure. So it's really a terrific model. It's not easy. It's a lot of work for opportunity and advancement. I'd say, where our commitment is, I'd say there's a couple of threats to this. One is environmental. Well, there's more than one environmental, but the really big one is water. So we're making a lot of commitments to water to keep this whole thing alive in terms of measuring, creating recycle systems, and also engaging in public policy efforts. And I'm a bit of an oddball in the industry. I think our water should be a lot more expensive. I don't make a lot of friends with my colleagues, but I like market forces, and you're much more careful with the things that are more expensive, but it's so necessary to keep this business alive. The other is, I think there's just a tremendous misunderstanding of the functionality, and I think we've, as a leader in this business, we've really been kind of remiss in communicating with the legislature. I'll see things come out, and I go like, that doesn't make any sense at all, and yet it's our job to make that better understood, how we can maintain a viable agricultural footprint along the coast of California, where it's pretty challenging.
Right. Well, thank you. And that perspective is unique, but I also think very relevant, turning to Maryam Brown, President of Southern California Gas, because I think the 3 leaders that we've had speak thus far, you have diverse workforces that span the gamut, right? From your workers, your line workers, to obviously your corporate leadership. So as you talk about your big commitments, whether it be around DEI or sustainability, what are those top priorities right now? And to that question of accountability, how's Southern California Gas holding themselves accountable?
Thanks very much for that question. It's great to be here. And Miles, I love the story that you told about the generational employment that you have at your company. We have a similar story at SoCalGas, and it's something we're really proud of. I think that our number one priority at SoCalGas is safety and reliability of our system, and I know that Jason shares that at PG&E. So this year, we are investing $2 billion in capital, and that is our largest capital program in our company's history. And over a 5-year period, about $10 billion, and almost all of that is dedicated to the safety and reliability of our system. But we are also leaning into the sustainability point that you're making on clean fuels. and really the role that infrastructure plays to transport those clean fuels. So what do I mean by clean fuels? We are very positive on hydrogen, and renewable natural gas is moving through our system right now. A key takeaway from some robust polling from Stanford that Lenny Mendonca walked us through yesterday was that how we get through the energy transition matters, and it matters a lot. And the reason it matters is because energy is complex. It needs to be all sorts of things. It needs to be affordable, it needs to be equitable, it needs to be reliable, it needs to be resilient, it needs to be clean. So at SoCalGas, as part of our Aspire 2045 climate commitment to reach net zero by 2045, we've been doing a lot of analytical work to help us to see what that future in 2045 and 2050 would look like. And we published that analytical work about 2 weeks ago. The number one takeaway from that I would share today is that clean electrons, so electrons derived from solar and wind and geothermal, combined with clean molecules from hydrogen, renewable natural gas, those working together provides the most affordable, most resilient way to get through our energy transition into the energy and environment goals that we all share. So as we envision our system, the largest gas system in North America, providing for the southern part of California, as we envision our system, we know in 2045 the mix of fuels in our system will be different, and that the value of the infrastructure will remain the same. In some ways, I think it'll be even more valuable. But it's used in different ways. It's used even more to support electric generation, and electric generation is expected to double over the next 2 decades. It's used even more to support a thriving industrial activity. Our governor yesterday reminded us that the state of California is the largest manufacturing state in the country, and the LA Basin is the manufacturing center of that largest manufacturing state in the country. And so we envision, our vision is a clean fuels hub in the LA Basin, supporting our industrial activity, our glass makers, our steel makers, our cement makers, our refiners, as well as our ports and our airports. And I think the best part of that vision is that a lot of the infrastructure already exists today. And an even better part of that best part is that as we talk about and think about a just transition, let's think about the value of a just continuation of those industrial jobs that provide really good opportunities for people, and the value of clean fuels supporting the energy transition in an equitable way. So the idea of leveraging existing systems for new purposes is one that there are many lessons through history of, especially those businesses that have been in history for many years. And a really good one is our telephone networks and how those were leveraged to become the internet backbone that we rely on so much today and that we're using today. And so I think the lesson from that is that history, it may not repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme, and it needs to rhyme if we're going to have the California for all that we're all working for in this energy transition. And I think the last point I'd want to make in response is really the importance of us working together and having dialogues like this. And I want to thank California Forward and Micah and his team and what it is that they're doing. I think the way the governor eloquently spoke about it yesterday was to highlight the importance of doers, right? And in our mind, the future isn't predetermined. It's going to be decided by what the doers do today. So thanks very much for the kind of conversation we're having today. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you, Maryam. And I know we can all agree when we talk about partnership, Becky Morgan, Micah, all of us here centering around these issues that matter so much. As I said at the top, Silicon Valley Leadership Group, we are working to usher in a new era of social responsibility and corporate stewardship. And, you know, JoBen, literally, you got a high-flying company, my kind of company, the types of high-growth CEOs that I get to work with a lot at SVLG. How do you view, you know, we've talked about corporate commitments. How do you think about that? How do you react to what you've heard? Is it primarily around climate, DEI, other issues? Would love your perspective.
Yeah, I think it really ties into all of those areas. I founded Joby Aviation more than a decade ago with the goal of building electric aircraft that would fundamentally transform the way we move every day. And we are making incredible progress building an electric vertical takeoff and landing air taxi service that will make it possible for you to fly instead of drive on a daily basis. This has really profound impacts for the quality of life in cities, our productivity as a society, and it's really exciting to think about all the watershed effects that this will have on so many different facets of our lives. I'd also like to touch on a few of the elements that have been talked about over the last couple of days. The first is COVID. At the beginning of the pandemic, I was very concerned about the lack of high quality, low cost PCR testing. And to me, that was an essential ingredient to keeping our communities and workforce and our state and nation safe. And so I made a Facebook post to some colleagues that I had the pleasure of working with about 20 years ago. And a group of us came together and founded a COVID testing company that it's called Summer Bio. Today, it's the largest COVID testing company in California. It also is the lowest cost COVID testing company in California. We test more than 100,000 LA Unified School District students and staff every day. As the governor said yesterday, winter is coming. And at Summer Bio, we're bringing an additional 150,000 tests a day of capacity online to try to keep our state as safe as possible through this coming winter. The third area is wildfires. I fought 4 forest fires in my life. The most recent last year, gathered with a group of friends and neighbors, and we fought the CZU fire. We were able to save hundreds of homes. Unfortunately and very tragically, we lost hundreds more, including the home that I was born in, the home that I built with my parents when I was 5 years, helped build with my parents when I was 5 years old, and 3 other homes from my lifetime that I'd lived in over my lifetime. We were also able to save thousands of acres from burning, and with it, more than 1 million tons of carbon from entering the atmosphere. I think Michael Ward did an amazing job yesterday of talking about wildfire. He's a fantastic leader. I believe he left out the most critical piece, and that is the carbon impact of wildfire. Wildfire today is almost 20% of global CO2 emissions. That's unacceptable. I want to end wildfire. We have the technology to do it. Let's make it happen. Fourth, aviation. I have flown millions of miles throughout my career. I love this planet. It is so beautiful. It's so beautiful to see all of the diverse ecosystems around the world. I love the people of this, all the diverse people around the world. It's amazing to get to interact with them face to face. And yet every time I get on an airplane, I am struck by the horrendous climate impact of flying. It's not just the 3% of global CO2 emissions. The actual impact is 3 times larger. The contrails, the soot, NOx, SOx, and water vapor emissions in contrails are a 3 times larger impact than the CO2 alone in terms of the radiative forcing and driving global warming. It is imperative that we move aggressively to address those impacts. We have the technology to build true zero emissions long-haul aircraft. We just need to deploy the resources to make it happen. So my message to California is, as we've done so many times in the past, it's time to lead the world forward to a more prosperous future. Thank you so much.
Well, I'll clap for that. I got to lobby Micah for more time next time. This is my favorite panel. I'm biased as the moderator, but really, our hearts obviously go out to all the wildfire victims, and hearing you personalize that, hearing you talk about how technology can help potentially end this scourge, it's inspiring. Now we've got our last 4 minutes kind of lightning round. I'll start with you, Miles, and I'll take my moderator privilege and pick a thread that was common in all that you said, which was the business imperative around this type of corporate stewardship. And maybe, Miles, I would turn to you to, whether it be climate, whether it be double-clicking around the other imperatives that you shared, how that aligns with the broader strategy, and how and why these are such priorities for Driscoll's right now.
Yeah, it's several years ago we said, where could we make the biggest difference? And it was with water that I mentioned earlier, and plastic. We use a lot of plastic, and we need solutions, both alternatives or recycling. We consciously said things like greenhouse gas or carbon footprint. We would sort of go along with the crowd, but that we could provide real leadership in both the water and plastic arena. We've done that not as well as we need to. The water will self-solve if we don't get after it more effectively, because there'll just be less of it. So we are upping the game there, and in terms of plastics, there's real issues with recyclability, but I think there are solutions. So we've got measurements for each of those, as well as a major pilot to change the packaging. Those of you who know the product, it all comes in ours and everybody else's in berries, and a lot of produce comes in plastic clamshells. The third area, I just can't imagine this zero impact. We're so far from it. But it's inspiring to be around people that get it more than I do. We have decided we're not going to go along with the pack, so we are committing resources right now. I mean, we're doing the obvious things. We're getting, we'll have all our cooling facilities on solar or other renewables within the next few years, and we've dropped the return requirements and just said that's the right place to go, both practically and for any other reason we can think of. But it's going to take a lot more than that, and so we're really just now setting the targets or doing the studies. One thing we will do, when we set the targets, we'll make them. I mean, this is going to be really serious. We're not going to have no greenwashing, because it won't get us anywhere. So, right. But I don't know what they are right now.
Well, the targets, the metrics, the measurement, obviously clear themes, and we measure what matters. And Maryam, I would turn to you to close us out in the last minute and a half that we have here. Maybe looking at Jason spoke to Patty Poppy. She talks about leading with love, which to me is a little You know, for a utility that's been around a long time, I don't expect their CEO to speak like that. I'd love to hear from you about why this moment is different and how you're capturing that momentum in 60 seconds.
I'll be brave. I agree that I love the mantra that Patty has moved forward with PG&E and Jason about leading with love. And I would say on this point, I think that we don't see sustainability as an adjunct to our business. It is our business. And for you to get a sense, our executive in charge of business strategy, he is the vice president for business strategy and sustainability. And we have organized ourselves around that. And so, and you see it in the commitments we make. And to your point about accountability, we intend to hold ourselves accountable, but we also look for our stakeholders to hold us accountable on the commitments that we put out there, because it's important that we all work together if we're going to get to the end that we want to get to.
Can I offer one thought?
Yes, please.
I think there's for us, sustainability and strategy and equity are not distinct.
Right.
We can't leave anyone behind, right? And I mean, in all of our industries, we power life in different ways. And so, you know, we've made a ton of progress as a state and as our companies in getting to the right averages in terms of average renewable penetration, et cetera. But we've got to find ways to mitigate impacts for the family impacted by heat in the Central Valley, wildfires up north, flooding in the Sacramento River Delta, you name it. And so I think it's really important that we start to really, you know, get surgical about what it's going to mean for every customer and every Californian about how we lead the way to that more prosperous and sustainable future.
That's very well put, and I think that's a great note for us to end on. Jason, Miles, Maryam, Joban, thank you so much for sharing your insights. Inspiring panel. I hope you all thought so. I've left this fired up, and we really appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you, Micah.
Right on. Thank you, sir. Marion. All right. Ahmad, appreciate it. All right.